This week in Tennessee, the state Senate passed SB 893 that requires public schools to teach what they're calling the, quote, controversy over evolution, global warming, and human cloning. The bill is pejoratively being referred to as the monkey bill, which is, of course, a callback to Tennessee's famous Scopes monkey trial in 1925, when a teacher was convicted for teaching evolution in the classroom. This bill says that teachers must find effective ways to present science curriculum as it addresses scientific controversies. As you can imagine, the Tennessee members of the National Academy of Sciences expressed their opposition to the bill and its companion bill in the House, HB 368, with a letter to the Tennessee House Education Committee. It reads, "These bills encourage teachers to emphasize what are misdescribed as the scientific weaknesses of evolution, which in practice are likely to include scientifically unwarranted criticisms of evolution. As educators whose teaching involves and is based on evolution, we affirm that evolution is a central and crucial part of science education. Neglecting evolution is pedagogically irresponsible." Right now, I want to bring in Richard Dawkins, evolutionary biologist, professor at the University of Oxford. His latest book is called The Magic of Reality, How We Know What's Really True. And he was one of the speakers also at yesterday's Reason Rally in Washington. Mr. Dawkins, welcome.
Thank you.
This seems like a kind of eternal recurrence problem, right? I mean, this battle, it doesn't seem to really necessarily move in one direction, or am I wrong? When I see Tennessee passing this law, I think there's an instinct to say, we're just still refighting this. And actually, if you go back and look at Darwin, he was fighting it when Darwin first published, and we've been fighting it ever since. Has there been progress in the sort of social acceptance?
I don't know about social acceptance. I mean, the fact is that there is no controversy about evolution. It's a fact. And all the reputable scientists in the world accept that. There is, of course, interesting controversy in science, and it's important that children should be exposed to the fact that scientists don't always agree. Sometimes the evidence is not all in, so that's fair enough. But as for teaching the controversy over evolution, what controversy? You might as well teach, in addition to the sex theory of where babies come from, the stork theory of where babies come from. You could, if you like, you could teach the creationist or so-called intelligent design theory. It would take all of about 5 minutes to give the evidence for it. There isn't any, and then you can get down to the true science.
Right, but my question more has to do with the fact that we don't. That these bills keep surfacing, right? That we go through these kind of bouts in which there was obviously Scopes trial in 1925. I remember about 5 or 6 years ago there was a big Pennsylvania trial that was more or less along these lines. And so, I guess my question is there some percentage of the population that simply because of their faith tradition or the figures in authority that they trust, as opposed to the figures in authority that you or I or some of the viewers may trust, are just not going to accept this? Is this sort of a battle that will never be won in your mind?
Ever since the 1980s, Gallup polls have shown that more than 40% of the American people believe that the world is less than 10,000 years old. Now, that's an astonishing error. These people have the vote. These people are ignorant of science, and they are voting in politicians who are also ignorant of science,
but lots of people
who yield power.
Yeah, but lots of people who are ignorant about a lot of things have the vote. I mean, that is sort of the crucial principle of democracy, right?
That's exactly right, and that's why we have representative democracy rather than having plebiscites like they do in some cantons of Switzerland. But when you have politicians who are apparently swaying to the wind of public opinion and who are legislating for truly ludicrous anti-scientific laws like this, then I think democracy is in trouble, and we need to look at how to remedy this problem. I was very interested in hearing the earlier discussion and the suggestion that there might be too much religion in politics. In a funny kind of way, I wonder whether there's too little and whether there's a sort of taboo against challenging politicians with their religious beliefs. So, for example, if you have a presidential candidate, say, who says he's a Roman Catholic, challenge him publicly. Do you seriously believe that the wafer turns into the body of Christ? Do you really believe that the wine turns into the blood? Don't let him get away with truly ridiculous beliefs without challenging them.
There's a lot of feelings about that approach. I think that way lies ruin in civil war, basically. But Bob, I want you to respond to that right after we take this break.
If your beliefs are as strong scientifically as you seem to believe they are, what's the problem with them being tested? You're going to decide on the mindset, the the training, the intelligence, and the future of this nation from your classroom, from what you and your colleagues deem necessary. And I find that totally anti-American.
As the State Rep John DeBerry defending this Tennessee law, which we were just referencing, which is sort of a teach the controversy law, we have Richard Dawkins via satellite, who just made, I think, an extremely provocative point that a lot of people on the panel had strong feelings about, which is basically that in the public realm, if religion is invoked in the public realm, then we should subject public figures who invoke it to skepticism and debate on the articles of doctrinal faith, for instance, the miracle of transubstantiation that constitutes the communion ritual in the Catholic Church, the church in which I was raised, the church in which my father was a Jesuit seminarian for 7 years. But that, to me, I'll just say from my own part of it, that seems like a recipe for the worst kind of debate, because everybody's private beliefs in this sphere are completely preposterous to outsiders, and what you end up with is a whole variety of cross-channel antagonism and hostility. Bob, you seemed like you wanted to respond as well.
Yeah, well, I think on the one hand, it's fine when people invoke religious belief to defend their views on public policy, to point out to them that they can't expect that argument to have traction with the larger world beyond their faith. That's fine. If you mean confronting them in that sense, fine. But when you go around, challenging their theological beliefs, and actually I know Richard goes further. I mean, USA Today quoted him as saying, I think at this rally maybe, that people should show, quote, ridicule and contempt for religion. And I just think that undermines the goals that Richard and I share. I think we both would like for fundamentalists in Tennessee not to inflict religion on the science curriculum. And the question is how to keep them from doing it. And I think there's a lot of evidence that what makes fundamentalists more fundamentalist and more inclined to do that is a sense of threat. And siege. When you have a sense of siege, and when you have arguably the world's leading Darwinian, Richard Dawkins, associating Darwinism with the idea that we should show contempt for religion, I just think that's counterproductive.
Richard, would you like to respond as the world's leading Darwinian?
I'm not the world's leading Darwinian. I'm not accepting that. I think that we're making too much of a deal of private beliefs versus public beliefs. You challenge a candidate about his beliefs on taxation, about military policy and so on. Why don't you challenge his beliefs about what he thinks about the universe and the world? If I'm a voter...
You don't think those are distinct? You don't think that there's a distinction between private belief and public belief in exactly that sense, what the tax rate should be and how...
I know that's the conventional view, and I fight this battle a lot. But I do think that as a voter, if I know that the person I'm contemplating voting for, however good his beliefs on taxation and so on may be, if I know that he privately believes that a 19th century man called Joseph Smith dug up some golden tablets, read them with the age of a stone in a top hat, and translated them out of some ancient language into not 19th century English, but 16th century English, that man was a fraud and a charlatan, and any modern politician who nails his colours to the mast of that particular religion is somebody that I'm suspicious of voting for. I know those beliefs are private, but they're crazy beliefs. And why should I vote for a man, however sensible his public beliefs may be, if his private beliefs are ridiculous and mad?
Well, Susan, you seem to have a response.
I think that there is enough to question people about in terms of the relationship between their religious beliefs and public policy, rather than getting into transubstantiation. But I do want to make the point I mentioned earlier, which is people who are, I would say, below the age of 40 don't understand that the kind of religion talk we're having in presidential campaigns is really quite new. Dwight Eisenhower, who I don't know what his private religious beliefs were, he was considered to be religious. Dwight Eisenhower and Abraham Lincoln did not go around talking about how their private religious beliefs or non-beliefs applied to the issues of the day. And it's very important for people to realize that this constant bringing of religion into political campaigns is really a product of the last 30 years. The first time it was ever raised, and properly so, was when Kennedy ran in 1960. But all he said then was church and state separate.
The speech that famously made Rick Santorum throw up. Jamila and Stephen, I want to get your take on this right after we take a quick break. All right. How we talk about people's beliefs, I think, is sort of where we've ended right now, particularly how we talk about people's religious beliefs in the public sphere and the degree of scrutiny we should subject them to, and specifically whether we should respect a distinction between sort of beliefs on public matters and public policy and private beliefs, whether those are, doctrinal in nature. I am, just so I'm clear, I'm strongly in the camp of just not talking about people's private beliefs, no matter how preposterous they seem to us from the outside. Richard Dawkins is arguing the opposite, and Jamila, you seem like you are on Dr. Dawkins' side here.
Thank you, Dr. Dawkins, and I just want to say that first and foremost. Here's the thing. If a candidate for president believes that I am cursed with blackness because I was on the wrong side of a war with his God, right. If a candidate believes that women should be subject to their husband's will or their father's will and women should be submissive, I need to know that before I go to cast my ballot. Now,
those are public issues, but those lie on the public side of the public-private divide, much more than transubstantiation.
No,
yeah,
those
sure
they do, but they are just as strong to be deeply held private beliefs. I need to know what my candidates think, and to give them a pass because you go, oh, that's a private thing, whether you believe you're actually eating the literal body and drinking the literal blood of your Christ. Well, here's the problem with giving them a pass. They legislate that way. There's no inclination to fix problems if you believe that your God is going to come back in your lifetime and rapture all you good people up and leave us sinners behind to deal with the fallout from whatever issue.
Okay, first of all, no one's legislating on transubstantiation. Just to take that particular matter, I mean, it just is not the case that anyone's legislating on transubstantiation.
But
there are a million.
But they're legislating on women. They're turning my health into an issue.
Yes, absolutely,
and I think health into an issue of.
I agree. And I think,
life begins at conception because the Pope says it does, and that if I present myself today in a hospital in Arizona and I am pregnant and the pregnancy will kill me if it continues, and I go to a Catholic hospital, they have legislated that it's fine to let me die. That's a problem, and that's a privately held belief that legislators publicly address.
And I think it's valid to point out to people who favor that policy that if they favor it on religious grounds, they can't expect the rest of us to buy into that because we don't share their religion. And I think that degree of argument is fine.
But we need to bring it up. We need to know about it.
In that case, sure.
I think we are. I don't think there's been a pass granted to anyone, particularly around the birth control debate. I mean, I think that's the area in which, clearly we're having a public debate about precisely this, and it's precisely the intersection of religion. The question of the degree of how much validity we want to ascribe to some specific doctrinal thing, I think, is distinct.